Hi, my name's Sonjia and this is my channel, See It Then, See It Now. Today's video is a long-awaited update on the guest bedroom. Now those of you who have been watching me for a while may remember this piece of artwork, and at the time when I did it I did say that I needed to create a place for it to go and that wasn't ready at that time and it was going to take a while. This video is getting that wall ready to display this piece of artwork, and it all turned out absolutely amazing. I'm so pleased with it and the piece of artwork looks really good on the wall. Just before we get into the video, I would also just like to say that this is not a how to do it, it's more of a how I did it. I'm not an expert, but I did get by and it does look amazing. So that said, let's jump straight in. I decided to give all these wooden trims a few coats of this French sheet whitey white paint before I started cutting it up and putting it on the wall. I knew that I'd have to paint it again once it was in place because I knew there was going to be nail holes and you'd have to caulk in any gaps against the wall, so I knew it was going to need painting once it was in place, but I just thought that giving it a couple of coats before we started would have made it easier. Did it make it easier? Probably. I did still end up giving it all another 2 coats once it was on, so yeah, it probably did help to give it these coats of paint first. This project is the first time that I've used plaster of Paris. My success rate on this was a bit hit and miss. I followed the directions on the packet and it said 1 part water to 2 parts plaster. The first couple of times I used cups. So I did 1 cup of water and 2 cups of plaster. But the moulds were breaking really easily. So Google told me that you need to weigh when it comes to plaster of Paris. So then I started weighing 1 part water to 2 parts plaster. This worked much better, but some came out really well and some came out with bubbles in. I just kept trying different ways to try and stop me getting bubbles, so I tried to not over mix and just mix it until I had it to a smooth paste. And then I tried knocking the edges of the tub once I'd mixed it to get any bubbles that come up to the surface, and then I'd pop and get rid of all those like I'm doing here, and then I'd just pop them all and get rid of them before I did the pour. I tried different things once I'd poured it. I tried knocking the mould to try and get any bubbles to come to the surface. I tried all different sorts of things, and just when I thought I'd found a way, I'd get a set that come out really, really well, and then the next time I'd do exactly the same thing, but then I'd have bubbles in it, and it was really, really frustrating. It drove me absolutely batty, to be honest. The first thing I needed to decide was how I wanted to place the mouldings and how I was going to run the piece of wood out from each side of the moulding. I don't want too much of this being in a gap, so I'm thinking maybe about there. So after much deliberation, I finally made a decision on how I was going to place the mouldings and how I was going to run the 2 pieces of wood either side of the moulding. The first thing I need to do is to square the corner. By square the corner, I meant mare to the corner, and before that I needed to remember how to use this little cutting device. I couldn't for the life of me remember how to set the angles, but I do get there eventually. So Becky, maybe you could just fast forward this bit to where I actually work it out. I didn't notice when I did this, but how lucky was I that didn't break them moulds. Note to self, don't cut your pieces of wood over the top of your mould so that the wood is not in danger of falling on and breaking said moulds. I then laid it all out and repeated the process across the bottom. I put it in place, decided how I wanted the mouldings to go, measured and cut my 2 pieces of wood either side, making sure that they were the same size. I really did struggle at times working out which way to cut these pieces of wood to get that angle correct. It baffled me at times. You can see it's taking all my brain power there. Once I had all the pieces for one of the squares, I then continued to cut up the pieces of wood for the other squares using the existing pieces as templates to ensure that I had them all the same size. Okay, so I've never done anything like this before. I am so nervous about this one because it's going to look amazing if it works. And if it doesn't, it might look dreadfully wrong. I'm going to do the first square, and I'm going to do the one that's down in this bottom area here. And the reason that I'm going to do this bottom one here is because the bed's going here. So most of this is going to be covered up. The middle one would have probably been a better one to do because that's pretty much all going to be covered up by bed, but I feel like you need to start at either side, make sure these are both the same, because you can easily alter the width of your middle one, but you can't alter the end ones, they have to match. So I'm thinking if I go from this side and do this one, go from that side and do that one, then the one in the middle, I can alter the width of it if need be. That's my thinking. The first thing is I'm coming in 15 centimetres from this end. Now obviously my wall might not be straight. In fact, I'll be very surprised if it is straight with the way that this house has been. But I'll put a line at 15 there. Put a line at 15 there. And then I've got this wonderful machine that has a nice little bubble in and will tell me when we've got centre. Using the laser line, I marked the wall to show where I needed to place the pieces of wood for the first square. This laser line was really helpful for this project. It made getting my lines straight very easy. I just measured in from the edge, marked the wall, and then I placed the laser through the marks that I'd made, but also making sure that I had the bubble straight, and that ensured that I had a nice vertical line. I then used the same principle across the bottom, so I measured up from the bottom, made sure that I got my laser bubble straight and through my mark on the wall, and that gave me a perfectly horizontal line. One thing that I did struggle with was seeing the bottom of the wall. I had to go get some extra light so that I could see what I was doing. I just really struggled with the low down marks. I just couldn't see that bubble to make sure that I had it straight. I got my first piece of wood positioned on the wall, and I double checked which was my vertical piece, and I double checked that it was definitely in the right place for where the horizontal piece was going to go. Once I was sure that I had it in the right place, I just stuck a piece of masking tape on just to keep it there while I got myself sorted for nailing this to the wall. I then did that double check again, and then just check one more time for good measure, thing that I always do whenever I'm measuring anything, just to doubly, triply, quadruply check that I have it in the right place. That is where that needs to go. Right, here goes nothing. First time using a nail gun, I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous. So this is now in place, and so I want my gap to be 50 centimetres. So I'm going to measure across. With one side of the first square in place, I now needed to measure for the other side. And I'm so glad I realised this before marking it all up, or worst of all, putting the pieces on. But I started to measure across from the inside edge of the wood bead, but I'd cut my pieces to fit a 50 centimetre gap from the outside edge. Inside to inside would have made my gap too small for the plaster moulds to fit. Or would it have made the gap too big? I think it would have made the gap too big. I don't know, my brain hurts now. Somebody please put in the comments, would it have made my gap too big? Or would it have made my gap too small? I think it's too big. Anyway, either way, I realised that I needed to measure outside edge to outside edge because that's how I'd cut the pieces of wood. To attach the plaster moulds, I pick set areas on each one. For example, the point at the end of, well, let's just call it a leaf. And then I measured the distance from this point to the wood trim, and this gave me a marker to use with each mould, just to ensure that they all went on level and uniform. To attach the moulds, a Google search suggested using wet plaster of Paris or grab adhesive. I had a large tub of lightweight coving adhesive, which was bought for a different project, but unfortunately that project could not be done. So rather than go out and buy something else, I decided to try this, and it worked perfectly fine. It worked really well. I just smoothed out an even coat onto the back of the mould. I placed it on the wall, lining up all my little markers. I cleaned up any adhesive that came out of this, that squidged out from the sides. I just cleaned that up with a small paintbrush, and then I stuck some masking tape over them just to stop them from sliding or moving until it dried. It really did work perfectly fine. It was dry after about 20-25 minutes, and they were stuck solid, and none of them moved, so this worked. It was just perfect. Now that the first square was complete, I needed to mark out where the second square was going, and I was doing the square that was at the other side of the room but still at the bottom, so I needed this to be lined up perfectly with that first square. So I popped the laser line on the wall. I got it level with the top of the wood, made sure that the bubble was straight, and then I just drew some marks on the wall, and I did this all the way across so that when I got to the other side, that gave me a line for where the top of my beading needed to be. Now I had my marker for the top of the square, I repeated the process with the laser to mark the bottom. For the side markers, again I measured in 15 centimetres. It was then just more checking and nailing the trim into place. Now 2 of the squares were finished, it was just a case of repeating the process to create the other squares. The more squares I completed, the easier it became because I had more reference points. I've just stood back and this looks amazing. I'm really pleased with it. I'm so pleased. So what I'm going to do now, before it gets too late, because I don't want to be knocking late for the neighbours, I'm going to go around and anywhere where my nail gun didn't, because I'm new to nail guns and some of them have gone in absolutely perfect. Some of them are sticking out a little bit. So I'm going to use an hammer and one of these little nail punch things, and I'm going to punch these nails so that they go further into the trim and they're not sticking out, so that then when I go over with filling in all the gaps, none of the nails are sticking out. So I've got this little punch things that I bought off Amazon. I'm just going to go around where I've got ones sticking out. I'm going to hammer them in. She says this is probably going to take me a week. I don't know if there's a knack to this, but if there is, I haven't got it. Once I had painstakingly measured and attached all the plaster mouldings, it was time to fill in all the gaps. This is one of them jobs that feels like it takes a lifetime, but if you take the time and make sure you fill in all the gaps, it pays off with the end result. I used decorator's caulk to fill in all the gaps along the edges of the wood and the plaster mouldings, and I used wood filler on the little nail heads. I don't know if there's a knack on how you're supposed to do this, but I basically just ran a bead of the caulk along the gap, and then I ran my finger along, smoothing it out, and then I wiped any excess off with a damp cloth. Any of the pencil marks that I'd left on the wall from when I was doing the measuring for getting these plaster mouldings in the right place, it comes off really easy just with a damp cloth. I found caulking around these plaster moulds a little bit fiddly, and I was using my finger at first, but then I found that if I used a little paintbrush, I would smooth it out with my finger and then get a paintbrush and just remove any excess little bits. It just got into the grooves a little bit better than what my finger could, and it just helped me get a smoother finish. Once the wood filler was dry, I sanded any excess off until I was left with a nice smooth surface. Once I was happy with this result, and some of these I did go back and put some more wood filler in and then let that dry and then sand it down again. So once I was happy with the result, I wiped all the moulds down with a damp cloth just to remove any dust. I now needed to cover up all the caulk and the wood filler, so I gave all the wooden trims and the plaster moulds 2 coats of the French Chic whitey white paint. Okay, so I've got some of the original blue that painted on the walls in this part, and I'm just going to go around the edges of this mould and just fill in where I've gone over on the white. So now I'm just going to go around the moulds, these wooden strips that I've painted. I'm probably going to mask them up and then just do it so that I get a nice clean edge. Sometimes people comment on how labour intensive some of my projects are, and I don't ever feel that way about them. I don't get bored or even think about how long that they're taking. I'm usually that engrossed in what I'm doing, it doesn't bother me at all. And even when I did for example, the Be Our Guest piece of artwork where I made all those clay flowers for it, at no point did I think to myself, oh gosh, I've still got 10 flowers to make, or I just get so engrossed in the process, it never ever bothers me. I once did a full wall mural, and that took a long time to do, but it never at any point felt never ending or felt like a chore. But this project at times, even for me, felt a little bit repetitive and a little bit never ending. All I can say is that the end result is so worthwhile. I've actually moved on a little bit with this purely because I forgot to press the record button. I'm guessing that's what's happened because I went through it all and it turns out I was talking to myself because you guys were not being recorded anyway. No accounting for user error. So I will explain what I've just done while I thought I was recording. So the mouldings have now been painted round twice, so they are all looking the part. So I want to get a nice clean crisp edge down the edge of these wooden moulds, these wooden trims. So I've masked off all the way around. Then I painted all the way around in white, in the white paint that I used on the wood. And the reason I did this is because if there's any seepage through the masking tape, it will be white, so it won't show. And by doing this, you get a nice crisp edge once you go in with the blue. So masking tape's on. I've got all around it in white, just along where the masking tape and the wall meet, just along that edge. Didn't put loads on. And now I've gone round with the blue and it's had its first coat. That's now dry, so I'm now going to put the second coat of blue on, and hopefully then it'll be good enough for me to take the masking tape off. Okay, overall I'm happy with that. There might be a couple of little bits that I touch up, but I'm going to let it completely dry so I can see exactly what's what. So what I'm going to do now is more masking. I'm going to mask all the inside of these now. It is never ending, but it's going to look brilliant. So onward and upward, mask the insides. All painted white. I'm going to go make a brew, let that dry, and then I can get on with doing the blue. I wanted to have texture inside the squares, and I had toyed with using wallpaper, but I felt like this was going to be difficult because I would have had to put the wallpaper on first before even putting the wood on. And as you guys know, my measuring skills are a bit special, and I felt this would have been a bridge too far. So I decided to use sand to create the texture. I mixed the blue paint with the sand, testing the mix on the wall until I was happy with the texture. This ended up being roughly 230 grams of sand to half a litre of paint. But don't take my word for it though, I did keep adding a bit of sand and then adding a bit of paint when needed, just until I got it perfect.
Yeah, clock, yeah.
Just put a bit of sand in the paint, that's all.
Go on, send that way to Mama, I'll get some chips.
Bye, sweetheart. You've got now some chippies. When it came to applying the texture paint to the wall, I used an old scruffy brush and I used a very specialised technique. I literally just slapped the paint on the wall, brushing it in different directions, and also dabbed it with the brush to create texture. That's as difficult as it got. I continued to do the same in each of the squares. This effect was so easy to create, but please be aware if you do give this a go, it is quite easy for the paint to slop and to just go flying off the brush, so just keep an eye for the paint just flying off in a different direction. I did have to wipe a couple of bits up off the outer parts of the wall, and it is definitely worth masking around your mouldings to make sure that you don't get any, because there was some on the masking tape. When I came to take it off, I had slopped in a few places on the masking tape, even though I didn't go right up to the edge of the masking tape. Okay, so this is all dry now, and the only problem I've got is I haven't got that like shimmery look to it, like a sheen to it. Now I've played about with a few different paints. I've done it all here because, and then I've gone back over the top with the blue textured paint. But I did it in this area here so that I get a good view coming in from the light, and also the piece of artwork is going to go here, so it's going to be behind the artwork. Not that you can tell that I've been messing now anyway. And what I've decided to do is to give the whole thing a coat, seal it all with a coat of gloss Mod Podge. The reason I'm using that is because I've had this gloss Mod Podge sat there doing nothing for quite a while. I don't have any gloss varnish or any other kind of sealers that are in gloss at the moment, so I'm just going to use this up. And I've done a bit there and let it dry, and it has made it look shiny, so I'm going to do just inside the panels of all 6 panels, and hopefully that will have this finished then. I'll be happy with it. The only slight issue I had with using the glossy Mod Podge was it was a bit smelly. The smell was a bit strong, but I had the window open and it wasn't like I was using it for hours on end. It didn't take me long at all to coat these panels, but it did work. I did get the nice sheen. I think I might bring the ladders in to make it easier for myself. Okay, I don't know how well this is going to pick up on the camera, but it is looking nice and glossy. You don't need to watch me paint 6 panels. 1 down, 5 to go. I'll be back when I'm done. So let's have a reminder and see it then. And let's see it now. It finally feels like the room is really coming together now. Apart from a few little tiny bits of finishing off, the actual room itself is ready for carpet. There is of course still some pieces of furniture that I need to sort out for in there, and I did say that I was intending on having all second-hand pieces and upcycling everything, so there is still a little bit of work with regards to what's going in the room. But the actual room itself, I feel like it's very, very nearly there, and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Moving on to our next video, and if you saw the video where I made this steampunk hat, I did say that I intended displaying this, and the next video is how I chose to display it. The next video is a little bit different because I did get the help of my very good friend, the Wannabe Welder. I will put her details in the description box if you would like to follow her. She creates the most amazing things out of scrap metal. It's just awesome. I did a little field trip. We went out, my editor and I went out and we visited her in in a little workshop in the middle of nowhere in the countryside, and we did a little bit of an interview with her and learnt a little bit about what made her go down that route. I may have had a go at welding, but that's to come. It is completely different from anything else I've done on this channel, and it will be worth a watch. So if you don't want to miss that, please make sure that you are subscribed. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Let me know what you think of this wall. Leave me a comment, please do. I love to get your comments, and I do reply to all of them. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.